Well, welcome to Why Invest, everybody. I've got a fantastic bunch of people with me right now. First of all, my long-time friend and compatriot there, Tom Haigh from Capital Property. Say good day, Tom Haigh.
Great to be with you, Craig.
And our very, very special guests, and they're beautiful people, Garth and Susie from Wellbeings & Co.
Good to see you. Thanks for inviting us on.
So, guys, I've known you personally and professionally for many years. You are sterling people, 100% trustworthy advisors. You're now doing Wellbeings & Co. Tell us a little bit about that.
You start, Suze.
Well, I guess from my experience, predominantly in training and education and going out to help people in the leadership space and doing that for a considerable amount of time, 20-something years, I guess we met a lot of people that were in that sort of burnout and stress and fatigue area of their life, and just looking at different ways that they could actually manage that. And given our own personal stories and Garth's and my own journey together with going through those stresses of life and I guess being in our second marriage together and dealing with all of life's pressures of living in a blended family and, you know, running businesses and working full time and doing all those things, that I guess we reached that point of fatigue and stress and burnout. And I guess when you look at well-being, it's a really big, complex area of our life. But when you actually break it down and you just do micro steps, which we've done, we found that it actually wasn't as, I guess, overwhelming as we first thought. So our job, our role now is to go and give away our tips and our micro steps, because we want to see other people flourishing and winning at life and really, you know, enjoying every day. So I guess that's where the intention came from and where my own purpose and motivation came from. So just converting that leadership space into the wellbeing space was relatively easy for us.
I love that you guys are doing this. You know, you both, as you mentioned, very experienced people, not only career-wise, but also in life. And if you're coming to some people for life skills coaching or life coaching, you actually want to be talking to people who have had those experiences and gone through it and, you know, been to the school and university of hard knocks, so to speak. And, you know I've sent people to have a chat with you guys yourself because, you know, you're just such a wonderful couple, very positive, but you've had your bumpy roads to get to where you are now, so you can relay that information. And you mentioned, you know, both the second marriage for both of you, you've got blended families. Tell us about some of the challenges that you've been through and how that can help our listeners out there with their lives right now.
Well, as Suze alluded to, we also have run our own businesses in the past, and probably 6 years ago for me, I had, you know, life was pretty good generally, certainly personally, but professionally I was really struggling with just working for myself and you know, getting paid for my time, which was just, you know, sort of was not infinite, of course. And I was just really getting sick a lot. I was getting stressed. I'm someone that really generally has enjoyed life and enjoyed everything I did. I enjoyed the core of what I was doing, the work I was doing, which was all around storytelling. But I was just getting smashed. I was getting overwhelmed. My immune system was dropping, and I just wasn't being able to contribute as a father, as a husband, like I wanted to. So that was for me a real wake-up call, and that's when I decided to go back to stuff that I'd learned from when I was a kid, which is around preventative health. For instance, I had parents that were very much into, you know, as an asthmatic, I was taken to an osteopath and a naturopath when I was 5. And they were like witch doctors in those days. So I grew up in an environment of very open-mindedness. My dad was into psychology and was fascinated by people and spiritualism and all that sort of stuff. So I got to the age in my mid-50s, early to mid-50s, where I went, hang on a minute, I know this stuff. I actually know there are things I can do for myself that are going to lift me out of this, you know, sort of the doldrums that I was in. So that to me was then, okay, if I know this stuff, sharing this stuff with Susan, we had conversations about this, you know, years and years ago when we were friends, long before we became partners. And it just made sense that I needed to start sharing some of what I knew and what we knew, and it kind of evolved from there.
Whereas my journey, because I didn't have that experience, my journey of self-development, I guess, started with a lot of grief in my life when my mother passed away over 20 years ago, and then my marriage. Very, very soon after that, I had a baby, and then my marriage broke up. So I was dealing with all this grief and all this conflict, which we don't automatically learn as a life skill from school and growing up. They're things that we actually avoid. So I had to sort of face them head on, and I really didn't know what to do with them. And then, fast tracking a few years down the track and working hard as we do, as lots of people do, and then reaching that place of burnout and going, I don't think I can keep going anymore. I actually don't think I can keep doing this. And because, and I can't speak for males, but I can speak for females, we sort of tend to put ourselves down the list of priorities a bit. And what I've learned is to put myself at the top of my list. And it's that old analogy of when you're on the aircraft and they give you the safety talk at the beginning of the flight, and they just simply say, you must put on your own mask before you can help anyone else. Well, I've used that analogy now in my life for a number of years, and I don't know if it's age and wisdom or if it's just the life experience, but you do get to a point and you go, hang on a minute, I'm number one. I don't get this life again. This is not a practice go. I've got to have a good life too. I've got to be kind to myself, and that's where I discovered that it was my responsibility to myself to provide me with self-love and self-care. And so that's where it started for me, looking after number one.
Can you talk the talk, but you can walk the walk? Tom Haigh, you've been out there at the coalface with a lot of business owners through your work with Capital Property and Newcastle Financial Planning Group. What are you seeing out there during this pandemic?
Look, there's a real mixed response, Rosie. I think, certainly people are better equipped than others to be dealing with some of the adversity that they're facing. I think, you mentioned a great point before about Garth and Susie's journey in terms of some of those challenges, the school of hard knocks, as we like to call it. And, there's a saying here, which is something around, smooth seas never made skillful sailors. And that's certainly the case in life as it is in business. And I think those who have had to overcome some challenges in the past are far better equipped to respond to the situation that we're seeing at the moment. I think there's obviously a lot of panic out there for people that naturally haven't experienced a big event like this, like most of us haven't. But for those that have again, I guess, been met with challenges in the past and understand some of the practical steps they can take to go about overcoming those challenges, I think that's critically important. That's sort of what it's setting apart the people that are going to, I guess, manage this whole situation well, come out the other side and prosper, as opposed to, unfortunately, those who are at the moment probably just living in fear and not being prepared to face it at all. So I think it's such a great opportunity today to have Garth and Susie on to share some of those tips and to share some of that experience as to how people can practically deal with it, rather than seeing it as a massive issue that they can't have any influence on.
So Garth and Suze, as a lot of our listeners and viewers out there, they're business people, they're professional people who own businesses. I'm one of those people myself, and I must say the last 2 to 3 weeks have probably been some of the busiest times of my life. And the reason for that is because we feel as business owners a responsibility to our employees and people that work with us and for us to make sure that they're right. And then we make sure to enable that, make sure the business is right. But of course, for ourselves personally, we're feeling levels of burnout. And I was so happy for the Easter break to come up where I could just have a few days of no work at all. What's some really simple advice to give to the business owners out there who are probably suffering the most, trying to look after their employees, their family, but maybe not give themselves enough care?
Well, we're very big on creating daily routines and daily rituals, preferably in the morning, preferably early. If there's one thing we can do, we can claim some time for ourselves. even if it means getting up half an hour earlier than we normally do. And I think that works at any time, but particularly now where life is uncertain, where we've got to be so adaptable, where we've got to be digging deep, as you said. This is the time, and it's kind of what Suze was talking about with the oxygen mask. I think this is a time, male or female, whether you're a boss or an employee, a parent, whoever, that we really need to set ourselves up and take time to be prepared for what might happen during the day. Now, and it can be different for different people. I've got a routine where I go for a run on the beach and a quick dip in the morning, or do a bit of meditation. But there are many different ways of doing it. There are many great books out there as well, which promote this idea of that first half hour of the morning, first hour of the morning, if you can find the time and the energy, and sometimes it just means going to bed a bit earlier, but just setting yourself up for what might come. And it's amazing how that can change your mindset and your attitude for the day. And it's kind of a reset every day, because every day is different, as we know. And I found that when I was working in my own business a few years ago, one of the things I learned was if I just woke up every day, just go, whatever will happen, and I'll just handle it, whatever comes. I found that I was not being particularly consistent. So if you want to find some consistency, I think you've got to sort of find it within yourself first, and then you're more solid as the day goes on.
And that too, it really has to be scheduled in. You have to put it in. You have to go to bed with the intention that is in my schedule for tomorrow. It's not I might get up in the morning and do blah, blah. It actually has to be in your diary. You schedule it in, because then it's more likely to happen. And when it's more likely to happen, you develop a habit, and then that habit becomes a routine. And it's because we've all developed habits over the years. It's whether or not they're self-serving habits and whether or not they're actually good for us. And all of us would have good habits and bad habits. And it's about looking at what we've got in this new routine, because everyone's in, most people are in a new routine. So it's about, looking at our schedule and going, okay, what can I control in my time with my schedule? And it is about, if you think about the world in which we're living, and you think about what is in our control and what isn't in our control, we can make a decision as to what we do and how we spend our time, first thing in the morning. And I know that there's lots of things happening out there at the moment that are outside of our control, but if we just bring it back to the present moment, the very present moment of where we all are, like right at this time, wherever you are in your day, and if you just stop in that particular moment, if you're worried, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling scared, it might be about your future, it could be about your financial situation, it could be about family members, whatever you're feeling overwhelmed or a little bit of fear around, just stop yourself and take 3 really deep breaths. We're breathing all the time, 24 hours a day we're breathing, generally speaking, on our own. But to be mindful of that breath and to take you right back to that moment and think to yourself, what am I actually afraid of in this moment? And what can I do about all those things that I'm worried about? It's just really being mindful about bringing it back to the present time, and being kind to ourselves. Being kind to ourselves as human beings, and then being kind to those people around us. And Craig, in answer to your question, that means being kind to all of your people, all of the team, all of your tribe, the people that you're working with, your clients and your customers. And the next one, it's a really simple one, but asking those people questions and just saying, what is it that you want? How can I help you? What do you want me to do at the moment for you? So that and then of course the second biggest thing after asking that question is listening to what they need, listening to what they want, and bringing it back to basics. Because if we don't ask, we don't know what people need or what people want. And
I can see that working so well, not only from a business relationship perspective, but once again with staff, with clients, but also with your own family, So, Tom, what have you been doing on a daily basis? Susie mentioned those habits. What have you been doing yourself to sort of get you in the zone? Because every time I've spoken to you, you've always been very positive, and of course, many people have had the roller coaster of emotions throughout the last few weeks. You stayed steadfast. How do you maintain that?
Well, it's a bit like a duck paddling on the top of the water, Craig. But, no, but look, I think some of the things that Susie and Garth mentioned around mindset and attitude are just hugely important. The consistent application or particularly carving out time in each and every day to focus on those things, I think is so important. The changes that I guess we're seeing from a business owner's perspective are so challenging if you don't take the time to process them and to think about them properly. I think everyone's having to adapt on the fly. Everybody's having to make changes almost, it seems like, on a daily basis. And I think taking the time out, and it might be 2.5% of the time in each day, it's such a small amount by comparison to what we spend so much other time doing, that it's such a healthy habit to take that time to process everything and to look at how we can change our attitude towards the situation. I think the biggest thing at the moment is there is so many opportunities. There are so many opportunities to adapt how we operate, to adapt how we do business, and also to connect. I think at the moment there's no one's driving around in cars, no one's commuting, no one's spending all that time how they otherwise would. If you then put that time into relationships, like Susie mentioned, in reaching out to people, in making sure that you ask people if they need some help, and just building relationships at a time when people really do need to and want to connect with you.
Yeah, I think that's some fantastic advice, and obviously, mirrors what Garth and Susie were saying in regards to some of the great habits out there. Guys, Garth and Susie, what sort of are some of the pitfalls you may see, say, business owners or people in their personal relationships fall into at the moment during these tough times?
Well, I think it's assuming things, which comes back to the need to ask people, just ask questions, have conversations, listen, because there's this really simple equation that we listen to understand and we understand to empathise. And I just think we've got to be careful not to assume that people are getting on, that people are okay. There are people who are great, even when times are calm, at looking like they've got everything under control. They'll continue to do that no matter how bad things get. And I know, Tom, you're talking about paddling really, really hard. That can sometimes be to the detriment. I mean, you've obviously got it all under control, but generally, but that can be to the detriment of people. They can look on the surface like they're fine, and they're not going to ask for help unless you really sit and spend some time listening to them. And I've found this. I mean, Rosie, you know me in my previous life where I used to interview people on film, which I did with you all those years ago. And the thing I used to love watching is I'd ask people questions, I'd listen to them, and as they started speaking, light bulbs had come on for them. Sometimes I'd ask someone simple as, why are you doing what you're doing? What got you into it? It could be a question as simple as that. And we sometimes just have to have that opportunity to speak, to know that we've got that we've got a lot of the answers. And I love it when that happens, when someone starts talking and they go, oh, that's right. And they realize that they've actually got the skills, they've got the answers, but I think we must be really careful not to assume that everyone's okay, even if it looks like they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to encourage back to that connection with people, and not just our work colleagues, but think of the people who actually live alone. They might be single women, they might be single men, they could be single mums. It could be someone who's older who lives alone. It could be any number of people in our community. And I've just decided to just phone those people, and make that connection every day, and just ring a friend or ring a person. And, sometimes they may pick up and we'll have a wonderful conversation, and sometimes I don't feel like doing that connection. It's really hard, but sometimes it's almost like I really don't feel like ringing someone and being social at the moment, because I might be not feeling at my, peak performance, but I never ever walk away from having a conversation going, wow, well, I'm really glad. I wished I hadn't have made that conversation. Like, it's pushed me
It's like exercise, isn't it? Absolutely. Very rarely do you do something that's good for you, even though it might have been tough to get started. Very rarely do you come back from a run on the beach and go, geez, I wished I hadn't done that.
Yeah. So it's that reaching out, let's not stay, reclusive, and let's be vulnerable. Let's find out how people are, because a particular scenario happened for us on Easter Sunday, and I don't know what it was. I don't know what we put it down to, but the more I spoke to people, I realised that when we were feeling a bit flat on Easter Sunday, and I don't know if it was because it was the third day of the holidays, and Craig, you might have been relishing in it and loving it. I was getting a bit, I feel like I've just done the same thing for 3 days. And when I spoke to some other women, they said that they were feeling similar on Sunday and a bit flat. And I thought, isn't that great, that, and acknowledging that we're all feeling similar things. We're all animals. We're all human beings. We're hardwired to be socially connected, even though sometimes we don't feel like that. So it is nice to have those conversations and realise that we're not on our own in those feelings and those things that are happening, that we're all doing it together. And we really are very similar, even though we're all different. We all do really go through similar emotions. And I think it's good to be vulnerable and be real about it and go, yeah, I wasn't feeling at my best on Sunday. And we were sort of going to our corners on Sunday, like corners of, I'd be upstairs and he'd be going downstairs, and we were sort of doing this avoiding thing. But we were actually, when we actually had the conversation, we were actually both feeling quite similar. And it was like, I'm not feeling my best today. Well, neither am I. But acknowledging that that's okay. It's totally all right that we're not feeling on, positive or grateful or whatever it is, that we do allow ourselves to have those moments.
See, I was being like a real bloke and just thought I was coming down from a huge chocolate sugar high, but I think there was more to it than that.
Well, like we said, everyone's on their own little roller coaster, and that could be on a by hour basis, or a daily basis, or a weekly basis. But I think it's important to acknowledge that. Tom, we know at the moment that the value of personal and business relationships, whatever we've put into those, it's paying dividends now, both from a business perspective, but also a personal perspective. I think this will be a time where people will really, appreciate the work that they've put into personal and business relationships on the face-to-face situation. Just give a little bit of feedback about how we can do that during the pandemic, where everything is sort of, a virtual space. What are some of the things you're seeing business people that they're doing right now that you think is best practice for both personal and business relationships, Tom?
Well, I think it comes back to, something that Susie mentioned earlier about, it's okay not to be okay effectively. There's obviously a big thing going around about that at the moment. And ultimately, I think it's accepting that, everyone's dealing with this differently, but there are lots of people out there that you can go to get some help, to pick up the phone, particularly if you're in a situation where you've got a personal issue or a business problem, because there's so many people in the community that do want to help at the moment. There's so many people out there that understand that there are some challenges, and there's some challenges ahead, but more often it's just about knowing who to call. I think for anyone in a situation where they might be feeling overwhelmed, they want to be doing some more personally to improve their mental situation and their mental health. People like Garth and Susie who can help map that out for them, who help them, with some practical steps and things that they can do on a daily basis to improve their outlook, to improve their perspective on things, and ultimately to help them with the attitude that is going to be required to continue to succeed through this period. So I guess a couple of things there, reach out to anyone that you think, may need some help, and don't hesitate to ask for help yourself.
I think if you look what's happening out there with a lot of sports people, with the online coaching, someone to connect with on that level, and I think now is a time for people to reach out to yourselves, Garth and Suze, where the well-being side of things. I mean, that's the basis of everything, isn't it? I mean, that's all your relationships, how well you be going in sports. So if that basis of your life isn't right, everything else is just going to come falling down. So I think, for you guys to come on the show today is very, very good timing, because there's people out there who may be just feeling a little bit frayed and not even really thinking so much about 5 weeks down the track, but they could sort of fall by the wayside in that time unless they're getting someone to be accountable to, some coaching on a regular basis, someone to be a neutral ear, and that will then help their business relationships, that will help their personal relationships, their family. How do we get in contact with yourselves? How do we connect with Susie and Garth, Wellbeings & Co?
Through the website, wellbeings&co.com.au, and our contact numbers are there, and our email is there, and we have a subscription in there so that we're doing updates and not too many emails, because we know that also can be overwhelming, and just reaching out to people. And so very LinkedIn, Facebook, we're Instagram, we're sort of we're everywhere.
Yeah, and
in a good way.
And you'll notice on the website a lot of it is basically was relevant to what was happening just a couple of months ago. We were doing workshops and presentations, but like just about all businesses, we've had to adapt, and we're online. We do Zoom calls, we do coaching calls for individuals and groups, and the great thing is, Rosie, that sometimes it is just acknowledging that you need to try to do something for yourself. Sometimes it's just that acknowledgement that if I just reach out and ask for a bit of help, even that decision, you're on your way. And then, as Sue said before, it's just small incremental steps to improving this big holistic part of our lives that we could all do better from improving.
Well, I think as Susie mentioned about being able to connect people and feel motivated to connect with people, that's an important thing, but that's got to come from within. So if you can have some motivation from people like yourselves to sort of get you to that level, both business-wise and personal-wise, that's only going to be a positive. That thing people remember down the track, and they're more liable to pick up the phone and call you for whatever reason, just to feel that upbeat skill, don't you think, Susie?
Absolutely. And this is not about perfection. This is not about taking massive action. This is just about little steps and acting on them to get us in the motion. And that's really, they're micro steps to just get us in that development stage of just, wanting to keep, getting that action motion. And you guys are in business, you know what that's like. And because we're human beings and we are problem solvers, we're the highest order animal, and we love to conceptualize and problem solve, which is great. But for some of us, we look at the bigger picture. And what we really need to do is break those steps down. And I mean, you can imagine what's going on for some, businesses and business leaders going, well, where do we start with all of these challenges? And we have to just bring it back to those basics. What do we need to do first? And in what order do we need to do them? But because we look at the bigger picture and we have this vision, and most leaders are visionary, we don't act because we think, well, where do we start and what do we do and how do we do it? So it's just keeping it really simple and starting that action, that motion, that movement,
Fantastic advice, and just talking to you both and understanding your journey to get you are today. I respect that, and I do appreciate that you guys have Wellbeings & Co now, especially during these exact times. So thanks very much for joining us on Why Invest. But before we do, Tom and Susan and Garth, I just want to have a time to get maybe one tip right now, one thing I can do immediately after I finish listening or watching this podcast that I can do to make a positive impact on my life. Tom, what's your number one tip?
Well, I may well pinch Garth here, so apologies in advance, Garth. But I'm a big fan of getting out each morning. Doing some exercise, getting the blood flowing. I think there's a real danger, obviously, with work from home at the moment and falling into a pattern of not doing that, not going out of your way to to exercise. So, for me, it's trying to get a bit like you actually, Rosie, trying to get in the surf each morning, or at least go for a swim. So yeah, that'd be my advice. As Garth rightly mentioned, you always come out of the water or come back from a run or from a ride feeling better for it. So
nice one.
My advice would be, Rosie, think of someone who you can reach out to for no other reason than you're just checking in to say hi, and to see if they're okay. That's, I mean, I've got a friend who does that every morning. When they've done their meditation or done their bit of exercise, they then ring 3 people that they think might want to hear from them. And you can do that any time of the day. So to take that time just to make a call, as Sue said, sometimes we don't feel like doing it, but once we do, we feel that bit more connected, and we feel like we've actually offered someone something without any expectations, and it's a great feeling.
Fantastic advice there, Garth.
About it, just do it.
Did I steal yours?
No.
Oh, good.
You've got plenty, mate. Don't you worry about that.
Oh, I know.
Mine
Don't
is
worry.
Just break it down, and whatever it is that you've been thinking about doing, do it, and just make sure it's one simple change on a daily basis. So mine for today is to drink more water. That's mine for today, was to wake up and drink more water. So make sure it's just one simple change every day, and so that you start to, just some healthy habits while you're hanging around and working from home. And just another really simple one is, if you've been working for 45 to 50 minutes, get up and have a walk. And it might even mean go for a walk around the block. They're simple. They're free. We're allowed to do them. So, and
immediate, you can change your life as soon as you finish listening to our podcast today. Once again, Garth and Susie from Wellbeings & Co. It's been an absolute pleasure. Tom Haigh, as always, great to have you on the show, and looking forward to the next one on Why Invest. See you later, guys.
Great to see you. Bye.